Now, joining us for a discussion on the Army's plan to deliver the force of the future, please welcome the Honorable Dan Driscoll, Secretary of the Army, and General Randy George, Army Chief of Staff, with Dr. P.J. Maykish, Vice President for Strategy at SCSP.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Very good to see you all. Welcome to the panel on delivering the future of the Army. I'm P.J. Maykish from the Special Competitive Studies Project, and we are honored to have here the two guardians of land power for the United States of America. It is an honor to have the 26th Secretary of the Army, Dan Driscoll. I would say I'm claiming the earliest confirmed with cabinet secretaries in February by force of your person and cooperation of the majority of Congress. So welcome so much, Dan. Sir, the 41st Chief of Staff of the Army, in the line of Jay Pershing, in the line of MacArthur, of Ike, George C. Marshall, and now you. And so it is an honor to have both of you here today, truly. It is a special time for us to be talking about the future of the Army, as the birthday for the United States Army is in 12 days, 250 days for the United States Army. So it's appropriate to be talking about this. And both of you have just cooperated on working together for something called the Army Transformation Initiative, which we'll be talking about today. So Dan, just to start with you, you came in on 25 February. What I saw in you personally was somebody who wanted to get to work. I mean, I'm not sure actually I've ever seen anybody just so much, you just wanted to work for the soldier, get after it with civilians. 2 months later, you roll out Army Transformation Initiative. What was going on in your mind? Why were you so about that?
So one of the first things when I got in that General George and I did is we got on a plane and we flew to the West Coast, and we spent a week, and we started up at JBLM, and then we went to Seattle and met Microsoft, and went to Silicon Valley and did the Google and the Meta and the OpenAI. And then we went down to LA and saw some incredible 3D printing companies, Divergent and Applied Intuition, that's doing autonomous software for vehicles. And then we went out to the desert for Project Convergence, which is our semi-annual Army tech event. And then we went down to the border to watch 10th Mountain take over the border mission. And so together we spent time with soldiers in all sorts of different phases of kind of where the Army is with its current supply and its innovation and what we've empowered them with. And I think coming out of that visit, what General George and I aligned on, and what he has known for a very long time, is we have to go right now. Like what we have done to the American soldier for the last 20 and 30 years, we have just optimized our decision making as a Pentagon and as a civilian and political structure for all sorts of things that have nothing to do with what soldiers need. And so under the leadership of the President and Secretary of Defense Hegseth, we basically took a plan that General George and the team had been working on for a long time, and we said, we're going to get this done in the next 30 days. Awesome. And so it's been a really exciting time.
Yeah, it's so awesome to see you move out on that. I knew it was in your mind, and wasn't surprised to see it happen so quickly. And General George, you've seen the changing character of war going back to the end of the Cold War, Desert Storm, all the humanitarian wars of the 90s, the wars of the 9/11 era. Famously as a scholar and a warrior, some things never change, and some things change all the time, like the Russian attack, the Russian bombers getting smoked by drones. What is your personal take on the changing character of war? Like, what do you see through your eyes?
I think yesterday was a really good example of just how quickly, technology is changing the battlefield, and we've seen this over the last couple of years that everybody talks about POM cycles and everybody talks about program of record, and I think that that's just old thinking. And the technology is changing as rapidly as the technology is changing in our pocket. It's changing, we know with software, and I think we're going to have to adapt all of our processes to make sure that we're doing that. So that's what we're trying to do right now. We've been doing that with transforming in contact, where our soldiers are very innovative. Like the Secretary said, they're very good. They understand technology. And I think what we got to do is make sure that we're aligned, and that's what we're trying to do, changing the processes up here to make sure that we're getting them the equipment, that's war-winning capabilities that they know they need.
Yeah, fantastic. I was wondering, when we saw the Russian bombers getting smoked, I actually thought about you. And I was wondering what was going through your mind, because you started to see drones on the battlefield yourself. When the Russian bombers got smoked, what did you think? And I know the details are still coming in. We don't know all the details, but what went through your mind?
I mean, I think a couple of things just to also show how things are different. I think we all knew about that within a matter of minutes.
Open
and
source.
It was everything was out there on open source. So I mean, the battle. We talk a lot about you can't really hide anymore on the modern battlefield. You're going to have to be dispersed, lower signature, all of those things, which we talk a lot about with our troops and with our commanders. But I think those were the couple of big things, is just how fast things are changing. I mean, we're looking at right now, we talk a lot about the cost curve. Look at how cheap those systems were compared to what they took out. And I think that has to, we have to be thinking about that in everything we're doing.
Yeah.
And it seems like I was at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, where I did basic training 18 years ago. I was down there a couple weeks ago. And one of the things that was amazing is these lanes that you take soldiers who have been in for 5 weeks at this point. We would take them down these lanes where they would practice what they were learning, but they had put drones up. And so they're watching, after their after-action review, they're watching themselves of what they could be seen from a drone.
Like debriefing with drone video.
Debriefing with drone video. But that part was interesting to me. I'm glad we're doing it. What was more amazing to me is, as you were talking to the drill sergeants who are now participating in these lanes as their squad leaders, it's not the same. They sit on the sideline, they just yell at them, and then it's kind of a pain fest. What was occurring is each time that these drill sergeants would go through these exercises, they would learn things from these soldiers who had been in 5 weeks. That was changing the TTP.
Interesting.
And that was floating up to us in the Pentagon. And so there's this scrappiness and innovation of the American soldier where they're just the most remarkable, talented people we as a nation, in my opinion, have. And what we're trying to do is basically flip the innovation from us and congressmen and senators pushing down on them what they should do, and instead flip the ordering. They're the ones actually out there doing the thing.
Yeah.
Learn from them and go get them what they need.
That's a great example of
PJ,
that.
I want to add one
please.
thing. On the same line, one of the things when we talk about lessons, everybody loves to say lessons learned, but you actually, unless you change how you're training and operate, unless you change how you're organized, and I think the biggest challenge for us that we're trying to bust through is change how you buy things. They're just lessons observed, and so that's what we're really trying to, to force inside of our formation. And we're getting ready to change our brigade combat teams to mobile brigade combat teams. We're going to have cyber experts, drone experts throughout this formation, and we're changing that. So I think you have to look at every aspect of that as you move forward.
I love the way you're talking about organization being the evidence that you have learned. It's great. And I think this is, everybody here, I know that we've been buzzing about it at SCSP. It'd be great to hear how those things are kind of manifest in ATI for both of you. Dan, it's got these 3 objectives, so if you haven't seen it yet, it's really about in changing the capabilities, optimizing warfights, and getting rid of waste. I mean, these are the 3 big picture things. Tell us about the objectives of ATI and the end state in your mind.
So I'm going to reverse my answer and end state first and objectives first.
Please do.
I think the end state we are hoping for is that we are taking the best practices of companies across America, and a lot of our, the classic example is the mid-sized venture-backed company in Silicon Valley that basically comes up with an MVP, gets it in the hand of the customer or the soldier in this instance, and learns from them and creates an innovation cycle where we are constantly working with private industry to get what they think will help our soldiers into our soldiers' hands, and then learning from them. And so an example of how we did that, and where we're trying to reset the culture is on that tour we did on the West Coast, we went to this company called Applied Intuition, and Applied Intuition is basically like the autonomous software for a lot of non-Tesla vehicles in the United States. And they had out Porsches, and they had all of these different vehicles there, and we said, have you ever done a military vehicle? And they said, no, absolutely not. The process is terrible. It's going to take 2 years, and we have no idea how we're going to make any money on it. And your requirements, you Army, you Dan and General George, are awful to work with. And so we turned to the team, and General George said, hey, I want you to get them a Humvee and an infantry squad vehicle in the next week. It showed up, and they said, well, what do you want us to do with it? And we said, just take 10 days, do anything you want. just whatever you can do. 10 days later, they sent us a video. They had fully autonomized these 2 vehicles.
Amazing.
They had tied it into their drone network. They had uploaded the GM repair manual to the screen so that it could walk soldiers through how to repair something when it went wrong. And then they had actually made it so that you could deliver parts on their drone network out to the field to this.
Amazing.
And so we said, that's amazing. We're sending a car carrier to pick it up. And within 3 days, it was in the hands of soldiers out at JRTC being played with. And they're sending us feedback constantly. And so the whole point of Army Transformation Initiative, which the Army has never created a thing without making an acronym, ATI is what we call it, is basically to take the best practice of what most small, medium, and large companies are doing, hold ourselves accountable to that, and then partner with the best of American industry. And so essentially the 3 things that we are doing is, and we can go into as much depth as you want, but we want to stop buying things that we don't need and don't want. So I found this kind of horrifying when I got in. We have 104,000 Humvees, and the Army stopped requesting them years ago. And what will happen is we submit a budget, our budget goes up requesting 0 Humvees. If you look at, there are all sorts of parochial interests in that, and that's okay, and it's the job of congressmen and senators to advocate for those needs and interests on behalf of their constituents.
Sure.
But we will get jammed with the Humvees. We will then ship them somewhere to add additional materials. They'll come back, and then they'll sit on a parking lot. We never wanted them. It counts against our budget. And so essentially, we want to cut things that we don't want to need. We want to spend it on things like drones and software layer and counter UAS that we actually do need. So that's one of them. The next thing is we, the Army, are a terrible customer in a lot of instances. We are bad to work with, and then we're also bad to ourselves. So we give away our right to repair our own equipment sometimes, which is just preposterous. So on our tours, you would see these exquisite pieces of machinery sitting on the sidelines for 9 to 12 months at a time.
Because you just can't fix it.
And we could repair it. We knew how to do it. We had a 3D printer, and the part was $2, and it would keep something out for a year. It was sinful. And so we want to get better there with all sorts of different things. And then the third one is basically, and General George has pushed hard on this, we've just become so bloated and so top-heavy, and I think you could probably say this about the entire federal bureaucracy,
Sure.
But we're just holding the mirror to ourselves. We just have too many people, so we want to push 1,000 people at least from our own headquarters formations back out to do the thing they signed up to do, to put on helmets and actually get to be soldiers.
It's such a good vision, and honestly, from getting to know both of you, I feel like it's hard to pick a better team to do that, really. And General George, you've been thinking about this for a while. I mean, the programs that have been developing through the Army to transfer to its character, like 31+4, and you've been involved in the transformation of Futures Command. How do you think the changing character of war, like on the business end, is going to be reflected in ATI, sort of your vision of that?
I was going to hit first, one of the things
please.
that the Secretary talked about was that we're also talking about is changing how we do requirements, because I think that's an important thing for everybody. One of the things that's been very successful for us is having the engineers out in the field with our soldiers. So that same example, we invited Applied Intuition out with us. They were actually out in the field, and they saw what the infantry squad vehicle needed to do, and so they were able to develop solutions that we wouldn't see. So we can write a 300-page requirements document, and we won't get what we're going to get by having the kind of engineers that this country has that are out there. And I forgot your question.
Not at all. But first of all, that Applied Intuition example, you just shipped them a Humvee, and the innovation went down instead of a requirements document, is a great picture of the end state. And if that's the way you want to make the Army innovate, that's going to be a massive change, right? Because it's just not designed to do that, large bureaucracy. Just curious about all the program visions you personally have had as you've come up through 1-star, 2-star, 3-star. What's like manifesting an ATI in terms of programs that you're excited about?
I think what we're focused on is making sure that if you're going to buy something like we're talking about, whether it's aircraft, any of the bigger pieces, is that they're going to have to be modular, open system architecture. So I'll give you an example. If you're going to have a tank or an infantry fighting vehicle, active protection is going to have to be a module. It's going to have to be, completely software enabled. And we were talking about, the new tank that you could basically pull out the guts of that and put it back in as software updates. So we are looking, and again, this gets back to the programmer record. That's just a way to deliver a software capability, these big systems, and that's what we're focused on, and making sure that we're building everything like that. One of the things that we really need to get to, and this gets to the whole programming, is that we're going to have to be more agile in how drones are going to constantly change. We're going to be trying to play the cat and mouse game with counter UAS, so we're going to have to work through that to make sure that we're buying systems. So we're going to need a lot more agility in how we buy things. And again, as the Secretary said, that's a struggle because everybody wants us to buy the same drone for the next 25 years.
It's like a paradigm.
And this last unit we had close to 400 drones in it, where we were out a week and a half ago at Joint Readiness Training Center. They were different drones than we had previously, so we're constantly updating those, and I think that that's how we have to be focused moving forward.
That's a great picture.
And just one of our big pitches, and we've talked with the President and Secretary of Defense and DepSecDef and VP about this, is we fundamentally believe the Army should be the innovation engine of the Pentagon. We have people on land with smaller things, but we have to earn that right. And so this was within the first couple of weeks. We basically said, hey, we will earn the right to do this we'll cut ourselves. So for ATI, the other thing that we didn't mention is it's $48 billion of cuts. And that's a lot of money that people want to go to other programs.
Sure.
And so we've made the cuts, we're recycling it to buy the things we want and need, and we're going to continue to run that engine and innovate. But then there's this kind of like third bucket of thing where the way we think about our new systems, our new tanks, like if you develop a tank to look like a tank of the past, it just cannot function and survive and thrive. If you think of a tank as kind of software manifesting in the world in this like hardware asset, it's almost like a Model Y, like the first tank that is software driven and it can be updated in near real time. All of a sudden, tanks have these incredible assets, like their ability to charge batteries in the field. They can just do so many things that the current version can't do. And so what we are trying to do is earn the right to basically ingest the best of the American economy and the best of the innovation sector on behalf of the Pentagon, figure out if there's an offensive or defensive capability to it, and then help partner it with the right place in the Pentagon.
Such a good vision of the Army. Like in the Pentagon, we're talking about one of the largest bureaucracies in the world. And that's I love the way you're saying, like, earn it. And the cuts are hard. I mean, one of the hardest things to do for any CEO is divestiture, right? And so, that's what you've both taken on your shoulders to earn it. I love that. I'd love to talk to you both about, this is a very diverse audience, but out here, 160 companies, we can hear the drones. The Army drone team is like out there racing in 15 minutes.
They better win.
We're going to pass that. What technologies excited you most? Because I know, Dan, from knowing you genuinely, straight up, when no one's watching, you are interested in tech. So what are the ones that have really caught your attention?
So it's even more basic. I think when we were doing this tour, and even before I came in, a lot of buddies are in that space, and I thought, man, all we're going to have to do is get the partnerships going, and it's going to be awesome. I think what I did not appreciate is this kind of required data layer that will connect our people with our things and our sensors and let the information flow kind of near real time. Like that is kind of this very binary basic first step that must occur before we can unlock the benefits of generative AI on the kind of Army as a warfighting machine. The way General George and I talk about it often, though, we think of the Army as kind of two discrete functions. One is just a very large enterprise business that ships people and things around the country and the world. That's one. And the other is a very highly lethal killing machine that stands by and ready for the President of the United States to send us out on behalf of our nation. And so these two discrete functions, I think, the technology will change them at different paces. I think to the perhaps more boring side of the Army as an enterprise business, large enterprise business, it's ready. I mean, our recruiting team, and this started before I got here, so I take no credit for it, basically they had these very customized, siloed software systems that the problem is not just that we build our own system, it's then we have to maintain it, it doesn't sync with anything, it's always outdated, everybody hates it, the experience is bad for soldiers, it's bad for our recruits. And so what the Army Recruiting Command did is they said, well, wait a second, why don't we just switch over to one of the largest CRMs in the world, Salesforce, and then why don't we look at what Salesforce is already offering us, and instead of saying, hey, Salesforce, our way of recruiting people for the Army is this way. We need a version of it. They said, well, wait a second. Can we just change how we recruit? Because fundamentally, it's just a sales funnel. And then they onboarded to Salesforce. And so they have loved it. The experience has been incredible.
Amazing.
And we've created these now digital files for each new soldier that what we're hoping to do is expand that through the entire life cycle of our time with soldiers, where they'll come in, that Salesforce record that was started in recruiting will follow them their entire way through the Army. And so what's amazing about this is these tools exist. Fortune 100 companies are using them every single day. And it will make soldiers' lives better. And then most crucially, back to the putting them back in helmets, get them back out doing what they want to do. Like, no one wants to just sit around filling out paperwork all day. Right. And so what I'm most excited about is in the next kind of 6 to 12 months, unlocking kind of the best of American tech to the Army as a business side of things. And then I can let General George answer.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, a lot of people say these are cuts, but as an example, what the Secretary was just talking about, we're probably going to cut half of our business systems at headquarters DA, and we are going to be so much more effective and efficient because of it. I mean, just all the systems and all the things that we've been doing, it'd be like everybody would keep a phone, keep a GPS, keep all these different things, and we know we can combine all that. We have smart boards now that can give us data that we want. This is why we're trying to be data-driven from top to bottom. And the big struggle is everybody says, well, hey, you can't cut this program or you can't cut these people. But there's just technology is going to help us be much better, and we need to embrace it, and that's what we're doing. Salesforce and what we're doing with recruiting is a good example.
It's a good example.
I will tell you that the network has to be for us, and we prioritize. We spend a lot of time talking about it. Everybody gets to hear from us when they tell us how long it is before we're going to completely transform, and we constantly say that's not fast enough, but that's the one thing that we have to transform very rapidly, and that's to become data-centric from theater level all the way down to the tactical level.
It's a big change because I'm not sure if everybody in the audience realizes, but technically you're the third largest operational organization in America, like Walmart, Amazon, and the Army. It's big, right? So if you're going to make a data transformation, it's amazing that you're already underway with Salesforce. It really is. That's no small thing. I know when we do war, we have terabytes of data. It just hits the floor. We don't do anything with it. This is a big change.
Well, and that's where, so we can kind of go on the continuum from the left side of Army as an enterprise business to killing machine. Like kind of in the middle is what we're starting to test out is taking Meta. So I assume many people in this room have seen their Ray-Ban glasses. And they've spent, I think, $25 billion in this space. And it's exquisite machinery. And we're not exactly quite sure how it can help the warfighter. We have some hypotheses, but instead of trying to fully bake our hypotheses, come up with a 200-page requirements list and then hope that in 7 years we can figure out if it actually worked after spending billions of dollars. Instead, we just bought a bunch of off-the-shelf Meta Ray-Ban glasses. We're going to put them on our mechanics. We're going to try to collect a couple thousand hours of our mechanics repairing our Humvees, and then test out the hypothesis of, can we train a generative AI brain that we can put the glasses on a regular soldier, and then in the field, if their Humvee goes down, can it get them 95% of the way there? We don't know that it works. It's a reasonably low-cost experiment, but we should know in a couple months, and then we're going to continue to iterate that way.
It's a great example.
Industry is doing this, and I think that's the key. We need to just stay, close to what's happening out there, that they're using these. We're partnering to use augmented reality. We have to change how we train, too. For us, it's going to reduce the time we're shipping people around. It's going to reduce, temporary duties. It's going to reduce PCS. And you can upskill your people a lot, quicker, I think, with this technology. So I think we're just at the front end of it.
Yeah, it's amazing to think that, this is what I thought, but I hope now everybody's hearing that how real both of you are about making the change already. Like, it's already underway. So let's talk a little bit about the funding of it. So you've talked about agile funding. We just kind of discussed that divesting is one of the most difficult things leaders will ever do. So agile payment and agile funding, like how the money's actually going to work. Love to hear both your thoughts on that.
So I think we've probably had hard conversations with 40 to 60 members in the last couple of weeks. I think one of the things I just had never spent a ton of time thinking through is all of these systems didn't just come to be through some arbitrary just kind of chaos machine. They evolved, and they evolved to this very, what I would define, and I think General George would define, as bad outcome because of incentive structures that I would say don't benefit the American soldier. And so funding and these, like what used to occur is there was a bucket of dollars that would go toward like weapons or gun, or like rifles. There was a bucket of dollars that went to like wheeled vehicles. And then what you would do is you would empower the Army's leadership with civilians who are on the ground every day listening to soldiers to spend that how we need to. So if you thought about drones as an example, drone warfare is changing weekly, and it's nearly impossible to guess what you'll need in a year, much less 5 years, which is what occurs under the current model. But the reason it came to be that we went from like 11 buckets of spending dollars to we now have 1,400 is because everyone along the way figured out, well, wait a second, if we very specifically prescribe this thing to something in my state or my district or to my donor or to something that a lobbyist takes me to a fancy dinner for, then I can control it. And there are healthy reasons of oversight that are very legitimate functions of government, but I think going from 11 to 1,400 was driven primarily by legislators wanting to be able to control the dollars for what I would define as slightly nefarious purposes. And so what we are trying to do, and this is hard to overstate, like the credit that President Trump and Secretary of Defense Hegseth deserve for providing us air cover, this is not intended to be sycophantic. We could not do this without them. Like we would get eaten
without
alive.
the cover.
This only works because the president has said, and I saw him this weekend, do what is right for the American soldier. Just go do it. They deserve it. Their families deserve it. The country deserves it.
That's awesome.
And we're going to give you the backup to go do this.
I think we're trying to also focus on how we buy things really in three buckets. Adopt a lot of things we can adopt commercial technology. The Secretary gave several really good examples. Modify is another one where we take something that's really good commercially. Our infantry squad vehicle is a good example that's based on the Chevy Colorado. Our soldiers love that system.
Nice.
They're out in the field with us, they modify it, and then I think there's things that we can specifically develop. I also think about what commercial industry is doing right now, how they're spending S&T, and I think it fits in that line as well. Secretary mentioned what Meta is doing with the glasses. Why would we come up with our own, that's the best, they're spending a lot on that. And so I think we're trying to frame it differently. We need to buy capabilities rather than buy stuff. I think what we're trying to do, especially when you're talking about drones or anything autonomous systems, it's happening. They're delivering packages right now. We're going to use it for resupply. All those things we should get, we can just get off the shelf. Where we're going to have to figure out is, I think right now, the Chinese have a big part of the market for drones. And one of the things that we've spent a lot of time talking about is how does the U.S. Army become the drone manufacturer, working with private industry to make sure that we're doing that. And I think that's one area we have to move quicker on. And then yesterday's example was, counter UAS, counter drone technology is something that we are just getting ready to kick off a big exercise right now called Flytrap this month and next to make sure that we're also focused on how we can counter drones inside of our formation.
Well, and I just to make sure it doesn't seem like we're being too rosy about ourselves as the Army. Mm-hmm. As part of looking in the mirror, what we've had to do is acknowledge, like, we have been bad to partner with. We have been a bad customer. We have created many of the bad habits in our industry partners and a lot of the primes that we don't like today. We've had to own that. If you look at the M10 Booker that we are not going to purchase, we spent billions of dollars developing something that we wanted it to be a light tank, and it ended up just being just a Frankenstein of just our own bad process that created it. And so we had to go to the Secretary of Defense and Deputy Secretary and say, hey, look, like, what would have historically happened is we would have it, we would go buy a couple hundred, we would stand up some units, it would be in our life for a long time, and we would just never come forth and say, look, it was a bad decision.
Bad.
We own it, and it would be sunk cost fallacy to keep purchasing it. We're going to do better. We're going to make this right. And then to our primes, as we've had to tell them these $48 billion are coming from somewhere, like, what we are trying to commit to them is, we want to work with you. We want to get you into the innovation game with us. We want you to be successful with us because we need it. But what you cannot do anymore is if you are taking a portion of your R&D dollars and you are investing it in lobbyists, it is not going to work. Like we, as of today, I think I can honestly say, as far as I know, we have taken zero parochial interest into account today, and we have no intention of changing.
Amazing. That's really amazing. Hear, hear. I think both of you describing how, in fact, you're trying to change the way not only you innovate, but the way the Army buys things. The three categories, General, that you mentioned, right? That's adaptable mentality. You're already starting to be a bit better business partner with the applied story, right? So you're trying to change that message, your message to what won't work. That's also changing the message, right? And so I think in this way, you're going to see how the paradigm shifts. It's really great. What about the people that are going to operate these things, right? And so, General, you know what it's like to get gear. You got to learn your way through the tech. You know, you've done that your whole career. Dan, you did the same as a soldier. What do you see as like your vision for recruiting? You put General Matt Brayman, an amazing operator in charge of marketing, to reach the citizens to join the Army. I mean, how is recruiting going, and how are you approaching that?
Recruiting's going really well. I didn't look. I should have looked at the stats before I came up here. We'll be 100. We'll meet our mission this week. So, you know, close 61,000 for our mission, and then continue. These are some of the best recruiting months that we have ahead of us. So continue to add to our delayed entry pool. So it's going really well. People are staying in the Army. Our retention, Secretary's talked about this several times. You know, we've met our retention goals very early. To the soldiers, I mean, they're still going to have to be tough, resilient. I mean, we're seeing that. That's why we love having people come out and see inside of our formations. They're also very technically savvy. I mean, that's not the challenge. I mean, you give them something, and they'll tell you if it works, if it doesn't, what needs to be adjusted to make it better. So I think we're getting great troopers out there. We have a good problem right now is figuring out how many people we can, bring into the Army.
And just on recruiting, I think when you're leading an organization as large, so the Army, for context, I think 950,000 soldiers, 250,000 civilians, so 1.2 million people. It's hard to get feedback that's workable to figure out, is this thing working or not? And it's messy, and so you kind of extrapolate and jump to some conclusions. But I think the way we think of recruiting and retention, recruiting to me and to General George, I think is like a leading indicator of a healthy organization. And then retention is like a trailing indicator of a healthy organization. And so on the front end, on the recruiting side, we hit our annual goal 9 months into the year, and we have our 3 best months, as General George mentioned. And on the retention side, so these are the soldiers that are actually in there, and they are seeing if you are, sorry for the language, but full of shit or not. And they're deciding, do they spend their lives with you? Do they bet their life on you? Right. And we hit our annual recruiting goal, retention goal 6 months into the year. And so we looked at that and thought it makes us optimistic about the direction we're going.
That's fantastic. I love the picture of leading trailing, like just knowing how healthy the Army is. And, obviously the world is not slowing down in terms of war, right? We see them all around. We know there's tensions. Obviously, the second largest economy in the world is developing a military that can attempt to destroy ours. So there's no better time for the two of you to be doing this right now, And I think we've talked about ATI, we've talked about the organization changes to get there, changing character of war. I know there's some people here, I'm one of them too, would love to hear, the president threw down on Iron Dome, and immediately you think like the Army and Missile Defense Agency, there's a big role there of the Army. What is sort of the role as you're seeing in the president's initiative there for Golden Dome? Like, where's the Army playing and how's that going?
Well, and we spend a medium amount of time talking with him about this. I think if you back solve the end state, which is, can we protect our American skies? Can we protect our soldiers when they're deployed? Can we protect our civilians when they are in the continental United States? I think it is probably one of the missions of our lifetimes to figure it out. I know the president received a little bit of pushback that China and Russia didn't like it. I mean, that to me is probably a good indication that we're like on the right path.
Yeah, that's right.
I think it's, whether we call it a moonshot and that word gets overused, and I'm guilty of that sometimes or not.
I still like it.
I do too. I think it is probably the challenge of our lifetime to figure out how do we protect ourselves. And I think if you think of the Army's role in this, again, we have people on land. It is much easier to camouflage ourselves. Our signature and our profile for the enemy to figure out where we are, we can do things that are just very difficult to do in air and sea at scale. We can blend and scatter in a way that I think is a little more difficult for the other services. And so what we have talked to the administration about, and what I think syncs with ATI and what our thinking is like if you thought of Golden Dome, there's a couple of layers to it if you just went high to low. I can hit low and then I'll let General George take high. But from the low side, what we are trying to do is start to think about drone and counter drone as part of that solution, and the dollars that the administration are setting aside for this, we think will be incredibly accretive for the safety and security of Americans. And then do you want to hit the higher?
I mean, it's going to be a joint mission. We're working with, all the services on this. You got to start with being completely networked and data-centric, from, what we're doing. I think we're, this is real opportunity for us. We always talk about integrated air and missile defense being layered, starting with counter-UAS all the way up. And what we're doing, and working with the Space Force and everybody else. So we have a lot of conversations about this, and we're going to roll up our sleeves. I do think it's important, and make sure the Army is doing everything they can to make it successful.
It's interesting that the Army, really, the Patriot system, when it was created, I mean, even for use in Desert Storm, it was the envy of the world for air defense, right? When a Patriot goes into alert status 1 and auto-associates and you can shoot things at Mach 2, that was the United States Army. Still to this day, I mean, the Patriots are, in use around the world.
Well, the problem with where warfare is today is, and if you look at what just occurred in Russia, these, I think Mike Gallagher references in the conversation before, the cost curve just doesn't work. We are a very wealthy nation, perhaps the wealthiest in the history of the world, depending on how you do the math. Even we can't have $4 million protection systems going after $800 drones.
That's right.
It just doesn't work. And so the fundamental flaw in what I think the President and Secretary of Defense are rightly focused on is we need scalable solutions. We need an industrial base that can turn on and ramp production nearly immediately and scale, perhaps not to infinity, but to a large number. And we need a cost curve that the math can actually work over a couple of years in conflict. And right now, I think with the innovation and the investment, I'm optimistic we'll get there, but we have to do the hard work.
I think that's the key to the flexible funding, that you're not going to be locked into buying something, forever. And, we like to talk in the Army a lot about continuous transformation and making sure that we're constantly in motion and adapting. All these companies out here are very used to operating that way. We're getting ready to do a test this summer with a missile that's a tenth of the price and is actually, more capable. So I think that that's what we need to do. And if we don't we can't lock ourselves into buying the same thing, forevermore. We are adapting. It's the same thing with our Patriot systems, THAAD, all of those, to make sure that we're updating them, software and doing the things that we need to do. And I think that that's just got to be the mindset. And what we need to do is bust down the obstacles when people know that that's what we need to do to change, just to make sure that we're continuing to do it.
And I think a lot of this, and General George has been, I say this with him beside me, a remarkable partner for his leadership style. I don't know that I've ever met anyone as respected throughout an entire organization. I can go almost anywhere in the Army and they know his name and they have some tangential story that sings his praises through someone they know.
Fantastic.
Which is remarkable. And I think one of the things we talk a lot about is, from our position, setting the right culture. The Pentagon should be more risk tolerant and less risk averse than the rest of the federal government. And somehow, some way, and this is just preposterous, like we are the equivalent of driving a car 1 mile an hour. Guido Calabresi had this thing. He was a law professor, and it was the Calabresi paradox. And basically it said, hey, if you could create this tool and if a God was going to give you this thing that would make humans' lives better, they could see more of the world, they could have more utility in their lives, but you had to sacrifice 10,000 human lives to this God every year, would you do it? And his first-year law students every year were like, no, I wouldn't do it. That's just the vehicle, it's the car. We set speed limits between 55 and 75 all the time, and we know there's a human cost to that, but we're willing to make the trade-off. We in the building, for some reason, have just taken these insane positions that just slow everything down. And so I think what we are trying to do is model the behavior that we know soldiers want to do, and just empower them to do it.
I love it. It's the way to be. You know, with all due respect, both of you, the duty that you're shouldering, again, like one of the largest organizations that are operational, the expectation that you both are leading land power for the future. You build an ATI. And there's a lot of oversight. You know, there's a lot of details that come with that probably make people risk averse. We'd love to end on just talking about what we can do to help you, honestly. Because, for instance, at SCSP, we live, thanks to the charitable extension of Eric Schmidt, you know, to support you. You know, we are here to just put the U in USA, and we really want to help. So, for everybody who's out here too, please let them know, you know, what can they do to support the Army as you go through this? Dan, first to you.
We need you. We just desperately need all of you. We need your innovation. We need your ingenuity. We need your patriotism. We know that we have to earn that right. If you are a for-profit company, which you are not, but we need to give you clear demand signals and a pathway to profitability that your investors can underwrite the risk. And so what we are sitting on the stage, and the reason we are trying to have so many of these conversations is, we want you to know that we desperately want you to make money off the Army by providing us the things soldiers need and want. And if you have a solution that a soldier can test soon, we want to get it in the hands of soldiers to hear back from them, and we will give you that feedback incredibly quickly. And so I guess if there's an investor in the room, if there's a small and medium-sized business, what we're hoping that ATI is a renaissance for the industrial base, so that all of these small and medium businesses across the entire country can grow. And we know that we have a responsibility to deliver on that. And so my request of all of you is, please become rich off selling to the United States Army.
Fantastic.
I would say two things, PJ. One is, I think, and we would be more than willing to help, is explain to people why we have to do business different with agile funding. I think that would help, you know, for us to get out there. I think we can do it in a way that, you know, we can take over and show, you know, we want oversight, but I think we can do it in a way where we come over and show people exactly how we're spending taxpayer money. And again, that's what we're trying to do, is get the best value we can for the Army. So whatever help they can, you know, anybody can provide on explaining why agile funding is what we need to do, especially when it comes to autonomous systems. I think anything with the network, counter UAS, you know, EW, I would put in those categories. And then the second thing is, what we are trying to do, and we have this conversation almost daily, is try to bring people into our formations. I think it makes a difference when you actually see people, you know, when you see the problems that we're trying to solve and you see how innovative our soldiers. It's different seeing, you know, somebody deal with something in the middle of the night when it's raining or when it's cold, or doing those kinds of things, and, you know, some of the environmental conditions. So they don't have to stay out all night in that, but it'd be helpful. It's always helpful when people come and see what problems they're trying to help us solve. And I just think I always see the light going on. The applied intuition that we saw down at JRTC, it was different for them when they were actually out there, you know, and I think it was beneficial to them too, to be in that environment.
I guess the very last thing I would say is, in as much as you're a journalist, you're a business owner, you're an investor, you're a worker who cares about these kinds of things, if you believe that this is actually the kind of thing you want to see from your federal government, like, we need you to be talking about it. We need you to be writing about it. Hold us accountable. We are going to get plenty of things wrong, and that is good. But what we need is that same top cover and air cover that we're getting from the President's SecDef, we're going to need from the American public at some point. And so if you have a voice and you have a person to tell about this, please do, and please look at it and see if what we're saying is true or not. because without all of you engaging in this, the typical forces in the medium term, everything returns to the mean. And so unless we change the mean, like we all know what it's going to look like.
Can I add one more thing
Please,
here?
please, General. Of course.
Since I was just looking, we got 10 seconds left.
Yeah, we got 10 seconds.
Everybody is invited to the Big Army birthday party
Yes.
next Saturday.
Fantastic.
the 14th.
250 years.
So I'd love
Ladies
to
and
have you
gentlemen, please give it up for the leaders of our United States Army. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you.